The last 2 weeks, I've been working on Mirage's documentation site and specifically just redesigning some of the way we handle the table of contents here. I love nerding out about this stuff, so I figured it'd be fun to just throw together a video and kind of show you some of the updates here. So this is kind of the old version, and this is the new version. So yeah, let me just talk about some of my thinking about why I felt like this was important to change. And this stuff can always turn out to be a bigger project than you think, which is why it took 2 weeks. But so basically, the first motivation here, you come to Mirage and you see the homepage. You can click on the guides here, and right now we have these guides as the main guides, and down here we have some advanced guides for Mirage. These kind of 3 one-off topics, just things that don't really belong anywhere else. And now that Mirage has been released and people are using it with GraphQL and Next.js and all sorts of technologies that are new to us and is exactly what we want, but there's lots more use cases for Mirage now. We want to be able to add lots of guides to the site. Docs are really important to us at this point in Mirage's kind of life. To us, the most important thing is making people successful with it. And so when someone asks a question about how can I use this with GraphQL or whatever, instead of just answering them, we want to be able to add a guide to the site and then link them to that guide. I feel like that is the best way to document projects. It keeps all this tribal internal knowledge out of our heads, gets it onto the site where people can discover it and be more successful with the project. So these 3 advanced guides right here are kind of an example of that, but we want to add a lot more. And so, originally I went with kind of no nesting or no collapsible sections because I felt like those are just sometimes not really needed, and it's just better to show everything like this. But given that we do want to add a lot more docs to the site, I didn't want to discourage us from adding new things to feel like we're cluttering everything up. So that was the first kind of motivation, was just wanting to make it so that we can add some more sections and collapse them and hide them so we don't overwhelm kind of new users. The second thing is that you'll see over here in the old design, when you click a page, we kind of scan the page for the headings here, and we can use the hash linking to kind of permalink to parts within the page. And we have this kind of subnav over here on this page, which is exactly what those are. So if you go to a bigger guide like the ORM, you can say, oh, fetch related data, that's interesting, let me click on that. For me, this is interesting, and you see this pattern in a lot of sites, but it's definitely useful sometimes to see an index, and especially when you're on the API guides, if you click something like server, you definitely want to see what all is on this page. But when I'm looking at these guides, and I click on this and you start reading this, over here, this is kind of out of sight, out of mind for me. And I always felt like just overall this layout was a little cluttered, and there's just a lot going on. If you just kind of step back and look at this, we've got the header here, we've got the primary nav, which is already 2 levels deep. We have the content, which should be the main focus here. And then we have this secondary nav. And again, it just feels out of sight, out of mind. Feels like it's easy for people to click over here, look at this, not find what they're looking for, go back here. And I noticed if you look at Next.js's docs right here, which is from Zeit, they had this treatment, which is really close to what we ended up going with. I actually got the idea for some of the UI elements right from here. So I think, Zeit has amazing designers, and I pretty much love everything they do. I think it's really clean. I noticed they had this 2-column layout. So, instead of our kind of 3-column, 1, 2, 3 right here, we have this 2-column layout. It's really nice because you kind of focus right on the content right here. And there's obviously a lot of docs for Next. Next is like a complex project, but you don't feel overwhelmed when you first get here. You see getting started, you see basic features, and I can just kind of look at this one piece at a time. And I can still click on these and get a permalink to it. But I liked how actually these open up. When you click on these, you kind of open them up and progressively reveal more about the page. And so I thought maybe we could do something similar where, once you click on a page, we actually throw it right over here. So, just like I'm over here and I click on data fetching, then I get more stuff right here. So it's right by my mouse, right where my eye's already looking, instead of having it over here, again, out of sight, out of mind. So that was another motivation for wanting to do this, where maybe when you click route handlers, this shows you right here all of the nav that's over here right now. Now, if you notice, you kind of click around this, there's a bit of jumping. This is something that is more difficult than you would expect, especially in an SPA. You know, the browser's really good at rendering links and navigating back and forward. And to get this right in SPA can sometimes be pretty hard. So right here, you'll see they have this kind of memory scrolling where if I click on a page, the page starts at the top of the page like you would expect. You can scroll down, click on another link, but then if we go back, we'll start scroll down. And again, that's something you kind of get for free with a browser if it's rendering a cached page when you go back, but in an SPA, normally there's libraries that handle this, but it's just, these are little details that you have to be aware of. So, you know, they do some things I really like, but then they also do some things where, you know, you're kind of here and you click this and there's a lot of jumping and it can be hard to kind of remember where you are. So there's some of these that are just intrinsic trade-offs with how you do this. But anyways, these were all things that we were thinking about working on this redesign. So basically, if you see where we ended up, which is this from where we are. So again, you'll see a lot of those same elements. You know, I also looked at views. I looked at a lot of sites here. Vue.js does a really good job as well. And if you go to their docs and, you know, you click component registration, you're going to see the kind of subnav here, right here on their page. And so I like this where I can click on slots and then I can say, oh, name slots right there. There's nothing else over here. And it's just clear when I click on this that we're going to something on the page. So those were some of the elements that I wanted. And this is kind of what we ended up with. So this is kind of the before right here, introduction, and then this is the after. So I like that, you know, you click guides and there's a focus on the content. We also fixed the header here. I felt like on the old page here, every time you scroll, you're just kind of moving the header and then this nav fixes. And I felt like it's just a lot of movement, right? And then you get the bottom and it starts moving again. And so I just feel like when I'm using guides, pages, and referencing and moving around, the less movement, the better, ideally. So that's just another little detail. So now we fix the header. And so when you scroll, you know, you're just kind of reading the content. Everything else stays still. I like that. And then, yeah, we move this secondary or really the third level nav from this page right here on the side to right here. And when you click on it, my browser's slowing down because I'm recording screencast here, but when you click on this, it scrolls right to it. And we already had React Spring in here, so we were able to use React Spring for some of this. So if you're on a page and you click a heading, it scrolls down to it. And then you can click on it if you want a permalink. We need to do a little bit more treatment there. That's pretty cool. Another little detail, when you click on this first, you transition to the route, just like you would expect. But if you're already on the page and you click on this, we just scroll back to the top. I like kind of knowing where I am in a doc site. And so that's kind of another little detail. And then, yeah, now we have this kind of collapsible treatment over here. And again, we evaluated that trade-off, which is definitely a trade-off, kind of showing everything versus hiding some things, in favor of this because we feel like we're going to be adding a lot more docs to the site going forward. And we want to feel like that's not going to clutter anything up. And we don't ever want there to be a question like, should we add this? Is it going to make things too complicated? I'd rather err on the side of having more docs and guides than fewer. The other thing that we didn't have was like support just in the UI level for root level components or root level routes rather. They always had this component always expected kind of a section header and then like a route right here. And you can see for API, we just like added classes, but this is not really needed. And for quick starts, everything had to be under a section, and Cypress only has one guide. So ideally, we just want like a /Cypress, you know, quick start /Cypress, and that's it. So that was another part of this work. And so now you can see over here in guides, we have like comparison with other tools and about right here. They're just top level links. So the treatment there is just, they're really the same. They're actually the same component here, but you can render them like that. And all this code is open source too, if you're interested in kind of how the animations work or the way we've structured this. We kind of have our own little routing layer on top. This is a Gatsby app, but one interesting thing about this is that we don't use Gatsby's pages conventions because that uses that blocks every route transition on fetching new data from the server. And we wanted, with a doc site, we know it's not going to ever be a crazy amount, or at least right now it's not, or most of these docs can be loaded up front, which is why the site is extremely snappy, because these are all client-side, pure client-side transitions that don't require any data from the server. And so we have our own, we're using Reach Router directly and not Gatsby's kind of abstraction around it. And we have our own little routing DSL that we can use to define new routes. So if you have any interest in that, you can take a look in the repo here for the site, which is at mirage.js/site on GitHub. But anyways, there's a top level page right here about, and then now quick starts, we can add single pages like overview, Ember, Cypress, and then we don't show all this stuff. Whereas before, this is what the quick starts look like. So yeah, we also lighten this color a little bit. Our gray palette on this site is, this site is built with Tailwind, but we customize the colors. The default grays in Tailwind's palette are kind of saturated with a blue, kind of heavily, so to give them a cool tone. But our design for the homepage, we had a designer work on this, and it was a more neutral grayscale. And so part of working with Tailwind with this site was bringing those colors in, and the designer gave us a few, and I kind of filled in the rest just using a technique I learned from Steve actually in refactoring UI, where you have these blocks and you just put them in Sketch or Figma and then kind of eyeball what's in between, and that way you can get 9 or 10 colors on a grayscale. So anyways, I think this looks a lot better now. This was our like 100, and we added a 50 to make it just a little bit lighter. So I'm really happy with how this ended up. And again, I just love nerding out about this stuff, and getting all of these animations right and the paths transitions right turned out to just be a lot of work. You know, at one point I had this, I went through a bunch of treatments here where I like that this collapses like this and there's some animation. And I was like, oh, what about when you click on the overview, we could kind of slide the old page, in-page routes down, the anchor tags down, and the new ones open. So kind of everything is animated and feels really fluid. The problem with that is that the page transition here in the main body, once you click on a page, is instant. So it would be instant, and then after the fact, the sidebar would be doing its thing, animating over there, which kind of pulled focus away from the content back to the sidebar. So it never felt quite natural. So I limited the animation to when the rest of the page is kind of stable, and I feel like that's a nice balance, just a little bit to make it a little easier to understand how the guides are laid out. Anyways, just some little details. Now the API guides are also top level here, and whereas before we had this kind of classes thing, and we had all the methods and stuff documented over here, and now they're all top level. You can just click server, and we have this little treatment right here for third level headings right here. So yeah, kind of cool. You can permalink to all these, of course, and now we're really set to just kind of add. You know, there's like 4 or 5 PRs to the site right now, trying to show how to get Mirage working with everything from React Native testing and development to Next.js and Nuxt.js and Angular. So now I feel like the site is kind of better situated to handle all this kind of stuff. And we actually want to add some new sections here really soon. We're going to add an examples section, because these advanced guys are really more examples, and we want to add a lot of examples because I think that's a great way to learn new technology. GraphQL examples with relationships and embedding data and including data and JSON API. And I just want those to be very easy to copy and paste. And another docs site that I really love is Svelte's guides. I think Rich did a really amazing job with this. And you'll see he actually has a REPL here. And you can click on this and basically see, you can just write Svelte code. You can even log in and save it to GitHub and share it. And if you go to examples, it's the REPL, but with a bunch of examples teaching you how it works. And so you can click on this, and you can change this, and it'll live update. So I would really love to get something like that on Mirage's site, where you can click REPL or examples, and we can just post a bunch of examples. You know, how do you simulate file uploads, or user sign-in authentication? How do you save a graph of data if you wanted to create a post with many comments? and then just have some really nice, almost like a Postman interface for being able to share kind of server configurations to help people learn Mirage. So that's kind of all in the future, but I'm really happy with just how some of this UI work ended up. I just like the simplicity and the focus on the content. And so, yeah, I think it looks much better than it did before. If we just kind of pull up maybe the server page and compare it here. Here's kind of the before and after. Pull up the introduction, before, after. So yeah, hopefully thought that was interesting, and thanks for watching.